favorite childhood memories revolve around summer vacations and family vacations, where we would take a driving trip to some place that had historical significance, or maybe something that was important to the operation and function of our nation today. And we would take a tour and also have some vacation experiences. So a little bit of fun and a little bit of education mixed in. One of my absolute favorite trips that we took was to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, where we took a driving audio tour of the battlefields of Gettysburg, where the famous Gettysburg War was fought in 1863 in those first couple days of July. And if you know anything about your history, you know that this particular battle was massively significant, and the fact that it had incredible numbers of casualties. It was the Union and Confederate soldiers facing off against each other, and many say that this is the historical turning point of the war, which of course led eventually to the Emancipation Proclamation and the Declaration of Freedom for slavery and equality in the nation, and now our progressive pursuit of that as a nation to where we are today. But one of the things that I always remember about that trip is that as you're driving, the narrator talks to you about the landscape of the terrain. And if you are from Pennsylvania, this will make sense to you. But if you're not, let me paint the picture for you. The battlefields of Gettysburg were wide, sweeping, open fields. They were often green and lush, and they had a tree line in the distance. As you got into the August months, the grass oftentimes would get dried out, from lack of rain, lack of moisture. But in particular, during July, with the humidity pressing in or the heat, in the early morning, there would often be a mist that would hang over the field, and it would almost like gather even over by the tree line, making your sight and your line of vision a little bit skewed or a little bit inhibited because of that mist that was there. And there's the narrator for this story, I'll never forget this as a child, talked about how in the early mornings were some of the best times to move into the position of war, because your vision wasn't clear because the mist had settled in. And so it was almost like a calm in the morning where there was actually significant movement happening underneath the radar. And I was praying about this season that we're in, and the Lord reminded me of this particular time in history and this visual picture that I had. And he just began to speak to me about the calm that happens that can appear to man like there is nothing going on, but underneath the surface, the strategies and the wisdom of God are at move, and they are playing out on behalf of God's people. Most of us know that we are in a time of warfare. If you're not feeling it personally, you can certainly see that our nation is in a time of literal warfare on the earth, and we know that that corresponds to a heavenly warfare in the second heaven. Our perspective and the call over our life is not to get caught up in the things that we see happening in the news, or the tensions that we feel happening in the place of warfare in the heavenly places, but to remember that God has called us to co-labor with Him. He has called us the heirs of salvation. He has called us to be seated with Him in heavenly places. And from that perspective, we can look down, and although it seems like there is a mist settling and people's vision might be getting blurred, we know that God is moving, strategizing, and making moves on our behalf. Our job in this season and this hour, and the thing I want to encourage you the most with, is to tune in to the voice of God and listen to what He's saying to you. Visually, things might look completely different, but God is speaking wisdom and strategy in this hour. And it is the incredible job, responsibility, and authority of us, the believers, to listen and be obedient. You see, when we get the directives from our Father in heaven, we begin to move much like soldiers who get the directive from their commander. Even though the visual actual battlefield may look a certain way, even though it may not suggest to us that the war is about to turn, our obedience, our response to strategy, and our response to wisdom in this hour puts us in the right position. The calm before the storm doesn't mean that the storm's not coming. It does mean that the wise will move and operate to be in the right position. So for this month, I want to encourage you to take time as an individual, as a family, as a married couple, as a body of believers to lean into the strategy of God. Stop trying to tell the future based on the news. It's easy to think, oh, everything will change by the time we get to this date or this date or this date. But the truth is, our God fights for us. Psalm 126 and 127 actually promises He provides for His lovers even while they're sleeping, meaning that God never takes a break. Even when the mist is settling, even in the early hours where you can't see anything moving on the horizon, the strategy of God is getting His people into position to advance and take the lands that He has promised. And so in this month, I want to encourage you to dial into that place with God, lean deep into strategy and wisdom. Instead of looking for vision and instead of leaning into that place, try asking God for Him to speak to you directly and give you directives. Start with something small. Practice the art of obedience. Practice the art of co-laboring and see what strategies evolve for you. And then walk in that great walk of faith to get yourself in right position for the turning of a war, because freedom is always the gift of orphans that come home.